Hi there, I'm Danny Henderson. Welcome back to my very special channel, the Disclosure channel that exposes everything good and not so good. But today we have a great one. We have the one and only, the very great, the alien, the real life, full blood, full blown, grown alien from a different planet. It is the one and only Jerry Wills. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hello, Danny. Thank you for having me back on your channel. I really appreciate it.
Of course, and we so appreciate you. And I know you were on a couple of weeks ago with the other men who will be speaking this year at the Galactic Spiritual Informers Connection. And I'm just so happy that I get to spend a little bit more time with you. We've been planning this for quite some time. You travel the breadth and the width of America constantly. So it's good to have you set up in your studio and having a conversation. In brief, although there's nothing brief about you, and it's hard to give a synopsis actually for those that don't know you, guys out there, there is actually a 2-hour broadcast on my channel on the entire story of Jerry's birth off planet and him remembering coming on to the planet, coming from space onto the planet, and being part of the Dwight Eisenhower administration when there was a program, a space program to bring children from off-planet newborns into our humanity to help them evolve along somewhat further. But that didn't really happen or go to plan, as we've come to find out. But Jerry is a living, breathing example of this. And so that's on my channel, guys, Jerry Wills, so you can go look at that. But Jerry, let's talk a little bit more about some of the actual real life extraterrestrials that you have met on this journey thus far.
Well, that's a bit. We can talk for a while on this. As many folks might remember, back about the age of 12 and a half, I had my first introduction to a fellow. His name was Zoe. And he looked just like a regular person, except the way he was dressed. He was uniquely different in that he had quite terrific telepathic powers. And as it turned out, I was able to communicate with him with a little instruction. It was maybe more by osmosis than instruction, actually. But as a result of that, it went on for a number of years until I was 18. And these contacts lasted, that amount from 12 and a half to 18. So, about 5.5 years. During those contacts, I would meet up with them periodically, him and the others that he also traveled with. I really don't understand what their, how they figure out their itinerary or what their plans were in particular. But during that period of time, I met 3 or 4 others like him. They were all quite nice. They weren't, I wouldn't say they were gentle, but they were friendly people, like you and I. You meet somebody and you become friends with them, and it's not that they're gentle, they're just people with you. I had a great time spending, anywhere up to about an hour, really. Sometimes it was just once a week, a few times just twice a week, and sometimes it's a couple times a month. So it really wasn't a dedicated schedule to this sort of thing. But it went on for quite a while. They taught me a great deal. They gave me great depth of insight into my own existence. I think we covered a lot of that during our last interview.
Yeah, we did. Jerry, can I
Uh,
ask you, how did they make contact? What was the protocol for you actually seeing them, meeting them, or connecting with them?
well, we lived, my family and I lived on tobacco farm deep in hills of Kentucky. It's not deep in hills now, but back then it was quite removed from civilization. We were about 20 miles away from Elizabethtown, Kentucky. And there were neighbors, maybe half a mile to a mile away, different directions, usually along the road that was traveled, common road, paved road. We lived on top of a hill. And when this initially occurred, I was going down into the woods to meet up with my friend Randy. Well, It was part of the woods I hadn't been into before. It was quite far from home. We were looking for an old Civil War cemetery. So I traveled the woods a lot and was very strong. I got down there. I was an athlete at the time. Randy, not so much. So I arrived to the location we had agreed upon, and I sat down and waited. When Randy didn't show up for a while, then I just sat back and relaxed. I was sitting on this large tuft of very vivid green moss. My back was up against this tree. I had on a t-shirt with the arms cut out, the neck cut out. I'd cut off jean shorts and combat boots. And I'm sitting there. Presently, I heard this crunching, like someone's walking towards you. You can always hear that in the forest. Twigs snapping and so forth. Didn't sound like an animal. It was heavier than that. It was a man. So I figured Randy's coming. So I'm just going to lay against this tree and act like I fell asleep because I just got bored waiting for him. Well, I'm laying back, eyes closed, just acting, silly. And crunching got closer. I felt the moss move. It was quite large. And I opened my eyes thinking I'd see Randy. Well, here's this man standing there. I'd never seen him before, ever. And this guy was wearing this, now you would call it a Lycra suit. But back then there was no such thing and you didn't have words for it. Just a one-piece outfit with a belt, had belt loops. His pants went down and just became his boots. There was no seam where the boots and the pants were disconnected when you put them on. His top part, right up to the wrists with this material. He didn't look hot, but I guarantee you, I was just sweating. I was wet, but he didn't look hot. And so he's just basically said, mind if we sit and chat, or mind if we chat? I said, hi, who are you? He said, well, my name's Zoe. And then the conversation took off from there. And he told me where he was from, and I'm like, uh-huh. And he says, no, really. He says, you remember last, it was October, November, the year before, there was a very large UFO that went right across the tree line at the farm. I said, do you remember that? And I said, yeah. He says, well, that was me. So anyway, we were talking, and then I noticed at some point I just felt kind of dreamy feeling, I suppose. Don't know how to explain it. Kind of altered consciousness. And I was hearing him in my head. He wasn't moving his mouth. And we just had a nice visit. It wasn't that long. And he said that he'd like to come back and visit again sometime. So I said, yeah, sure, that'd be fine. I said, how'd you get here? And he says, well, I have a small, craft over there down in the holler. I said, well, I want to see it. He said, no, you just stay here. Go back to sleep. You'll be fine. I said, well, I wasn't sleeping. He says, well, just relax then. And I said, well, I don't know where Randy is. And Zoe said, he won't be coming. So just wait here. You'll know when to leave and just go on back home. Well, he walked off. I heard this odd whistly noise. It wasn't really whistly, but it was, I don't know, just an odd noise, odd sound, not typical in the forest. And then I felt like I was going out of my dreamy state, getting more cogent. And I thought, Randy's not coming. What's up with that? So presently I got up and I walked the few miles back to the farm. I found out later that Randy got lost, got all turned around. And so he gave up and went back home. I can only wonder how he might have gotten lost, because it really wasn't that hard to find this place. Maybe he's telling me a story. I don't know. But that's how it all started. Subsequently, in the days that followed, that's one of the things we talked about as well when he was there. When I would hear this really high pitch, and I had always had really great hearing. It was a really high pitched beeping noise, almost like high speed Morse code. It was just right there at the periphery of hearing. I still remember it very clearly. It's always the same. And when that would happen, then I knew that he was going to be waiting for me. There was a spot that I was led to. I just didn't know he would be there in the first times. But in the end result was he was always kind of in the same area. But I went out of the house, which was no big deal, middle of the night. There was an outhouse. We didn't have indoor plumbing. So going outside was not really anything suspicious. So I got up, I went out of the house and took off running and went back. There's a great big hayfield. And when I came around this corner, the hayfield just went back, quite a ways. And there in a little alcove where some trees were removed and they'd usually parked farm equipment underneath the trees, here was this flying saucer sitting there, not lit up, but you could see a silhouette of something there. And so I took off running towards it, and there was Zoe, and that was the first time. After that, I knew where to go, of course, and I would take off and get out there as fast as I could. And then I'd have these conversations with Zoe that might last. Really, I mean, it wasn't hours for sure. It might be a half an hour. It might be an hour. It's kind of hard to remember exactly how long it was. But where I was, there was enough light to see. It wasn't brightly lit at all, except when he showed up in the daytime. And then, of course, you could see things quite vividly. And during those times, I, of course, met up with him, but there were several occasions where he had other men with him. Once or twice there was a woman. And, we had these conversations. So.
What color was Zoe's suit? And did he look more like a blonde, blue-eyed Pleiadian, as we would imagine?
Well, yeah, I'd say. Although, the features that you see in some of these drawings, they really are being represented as very stark chin lines. Almost like when I went to Norway or to Sweden, they had these very fine features that were indistinguishable from anyone else. You just know, oh, those guys, So, or Germans perhaps, but they had features like that, but they weren't nearly as sharp. They were softer. So when you see these pictures of them, they look quite sharp and well defined, and they really weren't that sharp and well defined. And actually, they didn't all look like each other. They weren't all like a bunch of clones. The two different men that I met, they were different height. They were all height and weight proportional, I'd say. The one fellow was a little larger than I suppose. He wasn't in as great a shape. The two women, they were very unique looking as well. One of the women, actually, now that I reflect back on it, she had features that you might see someone from India, perhaps. She didn't have dark skin, but she had a darker tint to her skin. They were all lovely looking people. I suppose you'd say the men were handsome, the women were very pretty. They all spoke in my head. So I don't know if they spoke English, but I presume they must have in order for me to hear them in my own language. I did hear them talking as well, and I could understand when they were talking. So yeah, I guess they did speak English, but they all had their own vocal characterizations. They were unique to themselves, just like people are unique to themselves. So that went on for, well, about 5 years, let's say. Um, at the end of that, Zoe told me that the time was coming for me to go out into the world and be like everyone else, to be out there with everybody, go out into the world and learn what it's like to live out
Oh, you froze. You froze.
in the summer. So it wasn't like, like most people figure a metropolitan kid would be like. It was life on the farm, and that was pretty much it. So he told me to go out into the world and be like everybody else, learn what it means to live here in a real life setting. So next thing you know, events transpired, and I ended up out there in the world. Didn't really know what to make of it. I never really had a concept for money. And actually, I don't really get it now, even. I think that, just a side note, I think money is kind of like points in a game you're playing. The more of it you have, then you're winning the game. But if you lose it, you just keep playing the game and get some more back. So that life was a bit difficult early on, from 18 and on. There were people using drugs. I ended up trying marijuana, cannabis. I thought it was terrific. Put me in the same headspace as when Zoe was talking to me. I liked that. I tried drinking. Didn't really like it. Everybody else was drinking and partying, and don't get me wrong, I liked partying, but I like to keep my mind intact. Um, After you've drank a bunch, more than you probably should, the next day you feel really crappy. And it's like, why would I want to do that? And I just explored my talents. I had a very keen penchant towards electronics and music. Well, I didn't have any money for musical instruments. I eventually got hired working in a place in Elizabethtown. You see, they'd given me these IQ tests in high school, and God only knows what they showed. They made me take the test like 4 times. They thought I was cheating.
Mm.
And finally, I said, I'm not doing this anymore. Average it up, and whatever it is, it is. I don't really give a damn. Well, I ended up working in this place that turned out to be kind of a government skunk works. And, I invented a few things, and, those things are out there in the world now. Most of them are quite beneficial. And the whole idea was to do something beneficial for people, for the people of this world. Anyway, kind of getting a little off tangent there. Um, when I was 28, it was 10 years later, I'd been told that Zoe would come and check in on with me periodically. So at 28, he showed up. I was married at the time, and um, caused a bit of confusion. My wife at the time was pretty much knocked out and told, go back to sleep, it's all right. And she was gone. And so Zoe and I sat there and had a long conversation. At that time, he told me that he wanted to make sure that I was going to be okay, emotionally, all right, because my mother was going to die in December. And if I wanted to make peace with her, because I hadn't talked to her in years, if I wanted to make peace with her, wanted to speak with her, then I needed to go to Florida where she was. I knew she was there. And I said, I haven't spoken to her in all this time. There were good reasons for it. Said, I have no reason to go. Well, just as he said, oh, and Zoe said, well, after she has passed away, there will be information that will come to you that's going to potentially change your life. We don't want you to be emotionally disturbed by this. And I said, well, what do you mean? And so he told me my life story, how I got here. He tried to tell it to me when I was younger, around 12, no, not 12, but 13 and a half years in the very beginnings. And I just wouldn't hear it. Well, he told me this time. So, oddly enough, that night, I found out several weeks later that the police had been called because a UFO had landed in the street, but they couldn't find it right out in front of our house.
Oh my God, that's
I
great.
didn't get any documentation on it. That's just something that the neighbors were asking me about it. Did you see that? We called the police. But when they got here, there wasn't anything here, so we don't know what happened to it. Well, anyhow, come December, I got a phone call from my sister that my mother had died. And then during her funeral, which was taking place in Kentucky, she called me again to let me know that she had overheard the men talking. That would be my stepdad and some of the other members of the family. And they wanted to know if I'd ever been told that I'd been adopted. And he said, no, she never wanted him to know that. Well, shouldn't he know where he comes from? I mean, that story is crazy as hell. And he says, that is crazy as hell. And no, I don't believe it. And he and I never got along anyway. So those details were slightly discussed. And this is what my sister overheard. And she called me from that place to tell me what she had overheard and told me the details of my arrival on this world and that I was adopted. Well, it was quite startling because I really didn't have a point of reference as to why I was so vastly different than these people. I mean, after all, they were short. I was very tall. They were, not in a disparaging way, but they were probably regular intelligence. I'd memorized several encyclopedias, all the works of Shakespeare. I had a photographic memory. I'd memorized a great many things. I was working on memorizing the dictionary. I wanted my vocabulary to be beyond anything anyone ever experienced before. I got bored after about C, but it's very dry reading, Danny.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now I had this information. What's that going to do for me? So fast forward, and the next thing you know, I've kind of gotten this backwards. Actually, 28 was not when it happened. It was 38 when that happened. I'm sorry. I've gotten it back. I'm telling you what happened when I was 38. So anyway, just kept going forward. I didn't have any proof of it, not until if you can call it proof. I was speaking at a MUFON event in Tempe, Arizona, about UFOs, my experiences, kind of like you and I are talking now, except it was a stand-up lecture. afterwards, this very old man came up to me all dressed in his regalia. It was July 4th weekend of whatever year that was. Well, it was summer, of course. In his military uniform. And he took my hands and both of his, and he told me that he was one of the men who had retrieved me from that farmhouse.
Mm.
That he never thought he would ever know what happened afterwards.
Oh,
So that was interesting.
yeah, that's a lovely story. Can you, in the realm of you sharing the beautiful ETs that you've met, you've introduced us again. Thank you so much to Zoe. But there was also an alien friend called Rich, and there are a couple of others. Can you share a little bit about Rich, please?
Sure, not a problem. That was quite a story, actually. Um, well, I started taking people on trips to Peru. These were guided tours. I was guiding them. It's an interesting story to the point of doing it anyway, but I'll leave that out for now. So I'm taking groups of people to Peru, and we're talking 20, 25 people at a time, a couple times a year. At one point in the second year, actually the last trip of the first year, I was sitting on the Intihuatana at Machu Picchu, which now you're not allowed to even touch it. But I was sitting on the Intihuatana. Now, this is called the Hitching Post of the Sun at Machu Picchu. It's a very prominent thing. Your listeners can go look it up. Hitching Post of the Sun, Machu Picchu. You'll see the picture of it. It's a solid piece of granite that goes straight down into the earth about 36, 38 miles. So I'm sitting there, and everybody did. And they sit there and meditate for a while and get up the next person. Well, after everything was said and done and people were gone, I went up there, sat there, and I just hadn't talked to Zoe in a long time. So I wondered if there was anybody there, and I sent out a message. Got my mind into that place that I remembered, sent out a message. And is there anybody out there? Told them who I am and so forth. And I just sat there listening. And a message came back to me and it said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm Jerry Wills. And I'm not from this world. I'm from another place. My contact's name is Zoe. He's from Cal City. And I'd like to have contact. Who are you?" And the voice came back and said, "Basically, we'll get back to you." It's like, okay, that was weird. So nothing ever happened. That was like, that was it. The next year, I'm back there with another group. And it started out in the Amazon. We gone through staying in the Amazon lodge and come back to the airport. Terrific thunderstorm was going on. And suddenly there was a commotion. There are these people bringing in this man. Looked like a Peruvian. And his leg was all burned up. A motorcycle apparently had fallen on him. And he was in a lot of pain and hurting. And of course, there weren't many people in the airport. I mean, this is jungle town. It's not like a bustling airport. They're all huddled together as lightning is crashing. Before they brought this guy in, the lights in the airport went out. It was just dark. And then they brought this guy in, and they brought him directly to where I was. I was standing, speaking a bit of Spanish, "Can you help him? Can you help him?" So I knelt down, took a look, pulled his pant leg apart, cut it apart with a knife, took a look at the wound, started ordering people, give me this, give me that, need some gauze, so on and so forth. And when everybody was busy and not looking, I just put my hands on him and just did the healing thing that I do. I don't think I've ever told anybody about this story. Well, anyway, the next thing you know, get it washed off, and somehow it doesn't look as bad as it did before. Of course, that's not that unusual when I work on someone. Anybody has seen my interview with Regina Meredith on Gaia when she burned up her hand, they'll kind of know what I'm talking about. Anyhow, I finished working on him, and a couple of gals are sitting there, they're supporting him, holding him, and got his leg bandaged up with gauze. And lights come back on. He opens his eyes. He gets up, looks at me, says, "Thank you." And he just walks out like nothing happened. And of course, the passengers, they're looking at this thinking, well, that's really strange. And the two people that brought him in, now they're walking out behind him like they're just a team. Well, that was that. So we finally get to Machu Picchu. And when you go to Machu Picchu, you're going to go to a little village, which isn't so little anymore, called Agua Caliente, and that's where we were staying. And from Agua Caliente, there's a road that goes across the Urubamba River and goes up, switchbacks all the way up to Machu Picchu. It takes 40, 45 minutes. It's slow. And back then, they were just rickety old school buses that didn't have windows. And the brakes, I don't think they had much in the way of brakes either.
Okay.
So, thinking ahead, I decided I would sit up on top of this old school bus because they had a rack up there. And I told the passengers, I said, if you want to sit up there with me, it's going to be fine. No, we want to ride in here. I didn't tell them why. Because you see, if the bus is going to go over the edge, it's a long way down.
You had your exit strategy all ready to go. I love it.
So if it's going to go down, I'm going to jump into a tree. If you're in the bus, you're screwed. So I'm sitting up there. There are some bags of, supplies they have strapped down. So it's a nice backrest. And we're going out of Agua Caliente, going down the road, going over the bridge, the Urubamba River. And on the other side of the bridge, there's a man standing there. He's flagging down the bus. Well, you don't usually flag down the bus, at least not back then. Maybe you do now. It's been many years. But the bus driver stopped, door opened, and the door closes. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Guy comes on the back, climbs up the ladder, comes up, sits down right in front of me, cross-legged, and we're going to go up, and the bus takes off. So in a case like that, you never know who you're going to meet because it's really a crossroads of the world. So I said, do you speak English? And he says, yes, I do. And I said, so where are you from? He says, oh no, I said, what's your name? And he says, my name is Rich. So where are you from? He says, well, I just got here from Venice Beach, California, but I was an anthropologist and a sociologist, anthropologist, and I was studying the culture there. And I'm taking a little bit of hiatus just to relax before I go back home. So where are you from? He said, the Pleiades. Well, this is the same year that a book by Barbara Marciniak came out called Bringers of the Dawn. In Phoenix, it was apparently a big hit because everybody now was either channeling the Pleiadians or they were a Pleiadian. One or the other. You could throw a rock and hit 10 people with one rock, that were channeling Pleiadians. And when it bounced off them, it'd be landing at the feet of people who said they were Pleiadians. So to me, it was ridiculous. So I kind of smirked and I said, "Ah, Pleiadian, huh? Okay." I said, I guess you read that book by Barbara Marciniak. And he said, well, we're aware of it. It doesn't really speak for us. So I had to think about that. Okay. I said, okay, you're a Pleiadian. I laughed. He kind of looked a little hurt and put off. He says, no, really, I am. And in that moment, it suddenly occurred to me that he might be telling me the truth. In a non-tangible way, I just had this feeling. Now, this guy had, you know what the stone topaz looks like? How it's so blue and translucent.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
It's
the
just so
topaz.
pretty.
Yeah, beautiful.
Mhm. This guy had topaz blue eyes,
Mm.
very clear. His earlobes actually were longer than mine. They were like longer. They didn't flop around, but they were just longer. And he had sandy, curly hair, looked like he'd use a shave. Just kind of looked like a hillbilly hiking the mountains, or a hippie hiking the mountains, in the Andes. You see that all the time. So, we just struck up a conversation. He wanted to know, as I recall, he said that he was there to talk to me. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, aren't you Jerry Wills? And I said, yeah. He said, well, you called out to us. He says, I believe it was last year. They told me about it, and so they sent me to talk to you. Holy mother of God. One of those things like in an Alfred Hitchcock movie where the camera does this weird thing and everything goes like that.
Yeah.
And I'm on top of this damn bus and that's happening. And it's just shaking us back and forth like this, hitting bumps and bumping us up in the air and back down again. So, what do you think about something like that? I mean, what can you think? We got to Machu Picchu. I'm not sure what the hell I'm dealing with. And the passengers get checked through the entrance gate. We go out into the grounds of Machu Picchu. And the guides, I told the guides, because you have to have guides there. I said, and I knew these boys. I said, take them up, go over here, Temple of the Three Windows, and go around this way, and I'll meet up with you at the Intihuatana. Well, me and Rich took off walking over to the Temple of Pachamama. Now, off to the left, as you're facing the Temple of Pachamama, off to the left, there's like this little shack, and that's where the guardian is at. The guardian is the guy that there's a book there. You write down your name when you're going to go up. Not many people do that. Some people do. And with me was this fellow. He was an emergency room psychiatrist or psychologist. I don't know which. Tall black man from New York. He was there with his sister. And he had the biggest damn binoculars I've ever seen. I mean, it's almost cartoonish. And he's walking along with these gigantic binoculars bouncing on his chest, kind of following a few paces behind me. And I'm talking to Rich some more. And we get to the Temple of Pachamama. We go off to the left of that, down a little path. There's the guardian's place. Before we get there, actually, just right at the edge of the Temple of Pachamama, he says, I'm going to go up there and just sit, relax for a while. It's one of the reasons I came here. It reminds me so much of home. He says, I'll see you later. All right, that sounds fine. I said, we're going to be back here tonight around 11 o'clock, and we'll be at the Intihuatana. He says, all right, I'll meet up with you somewhere around 11 o'clock, 10:30 to 11:30, right in there. So yeah, that'll be fine. Because we'd go back there at night so people could sit there at the Intihuatana and say their prayers and meditate and be there under the stars. No one in Machu Picchu except us. Real special treat for everybody. And he takes off, and I walk back. And Bob, this fellow I was telling you about, the guy from New York, he's standing over here now behind me and to my right. So I turn around, walk over there. I'm talking to Bob. He says, who was that guy? And I said, well, he says his name is Rich. He says, oh, well, he seems like a really nice fella. And he's looking around with binoculars, and he goes, oh, there he is right up there. And I said, no, that can't be him, because it takes, if you're running, you might get up there in, half an hour, but nobody's going to run up that damn thing. You're looking at 45 minutes to an hour, just, steady climbing. He says, no, I think that's him. Take a look. And he pulls them off, great big thick leather strap. I bring him up to my eyes and adjust them. I look. Now, this had been less than 10 minutes, probably more like 6 or 7. And there's Rich sitting up there on the little angled stone at the peaky point top of Huayna Picchu. And he's looking right at me. And I'm like in disbelief. And he goes like that at me.
Wow.
I didn't know what to think. I'm getting goosebumps now just remembering it, because it was like, that's impossible. Okay, so anyway, we went through the whole tour, lasted until the afternoon, went back down to Agua Caliente, and did all the things we would do, last part of the day. Next thing you know, it's 9:30, and we're all meeting back at the bus I had hired. And I'd paid for us to go back into Machu Picchu at night unescorted. So we did. We get walking through Machu Picchu, you get to the Intihuatana, and there's like 25 people or so. They're each taking their own sweet time, 10, 15 minutes a person, sitting there just sitting on this thing cross-legged, or putting their legs around it, or how they're sitting is up to them. Put their forehead on it, or sit there and put their head back and just meditate. So it takes a while, and everybody else is pretty casual. I'm deciding that I'm going to go over here. If you're facing the Intihuatana, it'd be off to the left. See, there's a wall. First off, the Intihuatana is on this kind of like, it's not a pyramid, but think of it as a very large rise on the left side of Machu Picchu. And there's stairs that go up to it. And you get up there, then there's this precipice that goes out in the direction of the entrance gate. And off to your right, as you're standing there staring at the stairs you came up on, off to the right, there's like a wall made of these stones like Machu Picchu's made of, white granite. And there's a door with a lintel. And then on the other side of that door, a few more steps, maybe 10 steps, there's the Intihuatana. And it's just open to everything. So I'm over here at this precipice. And the precipice basically is just that, because you walk out there, you look down, it's some cactus, and not a long way down, but if you were to fall off there, you'd be hurt. It's probably 40 feet with sharp rocks and cactus. Nobody would ever go that way for sure. So I'm standing over there. I'm looking at the Southern Cross. I'm looking at the night sky. I'm having a cigarette, just, listening to people say their prayers and toning and whatnot, all very quietly to themselves, of course, but you can still hear it. It's very quiet there. I finished my cigarette, field dress it, put it in my pocket, turn around. And then there's this sound. Maybe I can duplicate it for you because this is a really unique sound. I tell people what it sounds like, but some people don't know what that sounds like. So what I have here is some cellophane from a pack of cigarettes. These cigarettes, they're very good for you. So it sounds like this. And stops. Well, that's not a natural sound. And my back is now, I'm facing this doorway about 4 steps from going through it. And I hear this behind me. That's not natural. I turn around and there's Rich just standing there. Where I'm standing to my left, one more step and to my left, those are the stairs, the only stairs to get up there unless you go through and go to the other side of the Intihuatana and you go down some stairs over there. You don't get up there unless you come up those stairs. And I'm one step from being parallel to those stairs. So they're just right here in front of me to my left. Rich is standing back there at the edge of the precipice. And I turned around and he said, "Hi, Jerry." I said, "How did you get up here? You didn't climb up here, did you?" And he laughed, says, "No, that'd be crazy." And so I walked back over there and I said, "So how did you get here?" He said, "Well, I have my ways." So we talked. And what we talked about was what happened in the airport. He said, we wanted to make sure we knew who we were dealing with. That event in the airport was staged. We wanted to know the type of people that you travel with, what their hearts are like, what their intentions are. And we wanted to know more about you. Zoe speaks very highly of you, but we wanted to know because we don't know you. And I said, all right, well, that's fine. I said, I think everybody that was there in the airport that saw this kid that was hurt, I think they were all very concerned for his well-being. And he said, well, they were. Everyone pitched in and did something to help him. Some got blankets, some pulled pillows out of their backpacks. Somebody there had the medical supplies you needed. Everyone pitched in. Some were offering him water. Some were ready to give him food. It says everybody was very, very caring. I said, well, that's kind of people that I think that you would want to travel with because, you wouldn't want to have somebody that's a jerk. He says, well, that's true. But he said, most of the time, people could come down here are very self-absorbed. I said, all right, well, good. I guess they passed. He says, well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Are these typical of the people that come with you? And I said, yeah, it is. So the people that come with me are spiritual people. They're very keen to have an adventure. They want an awakening and they want to travel. They want to have fun, have a good time. He says, but they're representative. And I said, yeah, I've done this like my 3rd trip, and every time it's the same kind of people. And I can't predict who'll be in the future, but it seems like these are the kind of people that end up coming with me. He says, all right, well, I have a proposition. He says, as you know, I'm a sociologist, anthropologist. He says, and I have a team of people who travel with me. We would like to have interaction with your people when you come down here. And I said, I don't see a problem with that. He says, well, The thing is, they can't know who we are, where we're from. Because if they do, it's going to change how they answer questions or how they respond to us.
Mm.
And I said, well, I still think that's no problem. I said, it only makes sense. He says, all right. Well, in return, then once in a while, if you have a question, you can ask me and I'll give you the answers to your questions. I said, all right, I don't have any questions right now. I can't think of anything, but all right, that's fine. So that's how it all started. And there were many trips. And it was funny because some of these folks would come to me, after their encounter and they go, you see that couple over there? They look like they might be from some European country. I said, yeah, what about them? So, well, they wanted to know what we thought about our leader. And so we were talking about the president. I said, no, we're not talking about that. We're talking about Jerry Wills, your leader. What do you think about him? What is your impression of him?
Oh.
And they said, well, we didn't think of him as our leader, but then they would say whatever they candidly would say about that. That happened on more than one occasion. And interestingly, on that particular trip, there was this couple that was in the airport that was just sitting there watching what was happening. They weren't participating. They were like the only other people there paying any attention at all. They're just sitting there just watching. These same people were in Cusco. They were in the Sacred Valley. They were at Agua Caliente. They were walking along, just sort of mingled with us at Machu Picchu. And this is what Rich was talking about. So he eventually introduced me to them during that trip and said there would be others, not always them, but it would always be him that would be there. Um, so for the next 5 years and numerous trips, these folks got to meet Pleiadians and they never knew it.
Wow.
And they were always, we sure wish we could meet an extraterrestrial. And I'd always tell them, something that looked just like us, you wouldn't know it unless they want you to know it. Well, you have a point there. So as this whole thing went along, I got to meet others. On one of the trips, I was busy in a band. I was playing music, and I had some old band gear. And there was a musical group, Quero Marca. Very good. They could have been the Latin American version of the Beatles, really. They were that good. And they were just starting out playing in Cusco at a place called Ukuku's, UKUKU''S. Ukuku is the speckled bear. It's like a black bear, but it has white around its eye with a black ring. So it's the Ukuku. And in the Andean tradition, they have Ukuku dancers, which are men who dress up in these outfits and they have masks on and they have the Ukuku eye going on. So Ukuku's is a terrific nightclub. Had quite a few experiences there. And this band, Quero Marca, was playing music there. So while I was at Machu Picchu, I told Rich that I'd been invited to play bass with the band when we got back to Cusco. And I told him about donating the equipment. It was no small feat to get equipment into Peru either. Mm. So he says, all right, I'll tell the others. The night of the concert, well, of the performance, it really wasn't a concert. I showed up. The Cuckoos, Quero Marca, they're already set up and they're ready. The place is packed, except for one table in the very center, which was odd. That one's never empty. But it was about a third of the way back from the stage, big table, many chairs, and it was empty with a reserve sign on it. I went up, I grabbed my bass guitar, checked the final tuning, and before we even start playing, Rich walks in, and here comes like 8 or more others right behind him, just in a single file, make their way through, get to the table. They all sit there. Drinks are ordered. They're sitting there, and they're drinking their drinks, which were fruit drinks. And I played music with Ketero Marco. I wasn't great because, well, Spanish is a little weird sometimes, especially with music. For example, if playing a key of E, it sounds like they're saying A because of Spanish, the way they pronounce it.
Yeah.
And so they say, I said, what key is this in? E. Oh, it's an E? Like E? No, E. Well, anyway, I managed to do, a bit of a bit of playing music that night. After the first break, sit down, my guitar went off, and everybody with Rich got up. They walked out. I walked out with them. They thought it was a great deal of fun. They were glad they had an opportunity to see me play music, and said that they had to leave. Yeah, I left out something. I just remembered. I'll tell you in a second. So they had to leave, and that they would see me again soon. Then Rich stayed behind, and he told me that there was a geophysical survey ship that was making its way from South America and going north. And he says, I think it's going to be passing right through where you live in Phoenix. I said, okay, when? He says, well, I'm not really sure, but it's probably going to be in the springtime, early spring. Apparently they were mapping, all the fault lines. There's lots of them in South America, lots of them in Central America, and of course, a great number in North America. And they were mapping all these fault lines. So he says, just watch for it. He says, you can't miss it. He says, it's gigantic. So, all right, well, keep my eyes open. And then they left. Now, the part that I forgot to mention, we flash back for a moment to the Intihuatana. When Rich was standing there, it was time for him to go. He said he'd see me later. And so I'm waiting for him to leave, and said, well, how are you going? So you're going to go down? And he says, no, I've got my own method. He turned his hip a little bit towards me, and on his hip, what looked like a small, Zippo lighters come in a regular size and a small size. This looked like a small silver Zippo lighter size thing. And in the center of all that silvery looking device was a very pale blue place where you might put your finger, like your fingertip would fit onto it. Kind of like if you can imagine a contact lens, how that's just concave and you put your finger on it. It was just very dim blue. And he says, I'll see you later, Jerry. And he put his finger, and he told me about it. He put his finger there, and I said, hey, can I try that? And he said, no. And then he laughed, and he put his finger there. And when he did, that sound came back. And he turned into this blue sphere that was, it was bigger than a marble, you know. Maybe you could say it was like a jawbreaker size. Not gigantic jawbreaker, but I'm talking like maybe an inch across.
Mm.
Just a luminous blue sphere. And it was translucent. It wasn't like a solid thing. And it just hung there for a moment. Then it just floated off, went over towards the temple of Pachamama and went on over the hill and just disappeared behind Huayna Picchu. And I thought that was just extraordinary. Now, the part that I also didn't tell you is what happened to Bob. So I've kind of jumped around here a bit. I'm sorry.
I know, I love it.
Because as I'm remembering things, you know, other little details come in. Well, Bob had decided that he was going to spend the night at Machu Picchu. He's not going back to the hotel. Can you help me with that, Jerry? I said, I know exactly where you can hide out. There's a place where the llamas sleep. It's right over there. And I took him to it and I showed him. I said, it's nice and soft. There's no fleas. There's no bugs. And it's just straw. He says, well, I've got, you know, a little sleeping bag here with me. I don't think it'd be that cold. He says, so that's great. So when Bob disappeared, no one was asking, where's Bob? And when I did a head count, Bob always sat in the back of the bus. And so he was the first person I counted. So no one knew that he wasn't there. We didn't see Bob until the next morning. We're going back up to Machu Picchu. It's about 8:30. Yeah, about 8:30 in the morning. Bus is going up there. And as we're going across the bridge at the Urubamba River, here's Bob, and he's walking. So we stopped the bus. I told the driver, stop. I got out, talked to Bob. And I said, are you all right? And he says, no, I'm not. No, I'm going back to the hotel room. So what happened? He says, I don't want to talk about it, okay? I just don't want to talk about it. He just took off walking. Well, fortunately, Bob's sister was on this trip with us. They were traveling together. And eventually, Bob did talk to his sister, but he didn't talk to anybody for days. He told his sister that he was up there asleep. And that night, he couldn't sleep. He was like too excited. That night, a very large green UFO lifted right down out of the clouds and just sat there and spoke to him. He said it was gigantic. And he would never tell anybody what it said, not even his sister. To this day, I haven't a clue. But I guess whatever happened, they took him on board, maybe. He just didn't want to talk about it. Scared the living hell out of him. And he was up all night long until there's enough light to walk his ass down out of there and get back to the hotel to what he perceived as safety.
Wow.
And I've never found out what that was all about.
Mm.
So that's the little flashback that I wanted to include.
So interesting. And that's a long walk down that switchback, a long walk.
Well, at each one of the corners of the switchback, there are stairs. Originally, Machu Picchu had stairs built by its constructors. These stairs are very narrow, and they just go right up the damn mountain, just like straight up. But there are stairs. You can climb those stairs up or down. I've never done it. I've never needed to. It's a lot easier to ride the damn bus up. But if you go to Machu Picchu, you'll see when you're coming down, there'll be these boys that are running down these, and they meet the bus, and it's always the same boys going, goodbye. And the bus drives on past. Next thing you know, zoom, get to the next switchback where it goes this way and it goes back this way again. Well, this next one here, they're standing there, same boys, goodbye. It's kind of a trippy thing.
Wow.
And so finally the bus stops at the bottom before it makes that final right turn to go past the bridge there at Urubamba, the river. The boys come on and they get tips and people throw cash in their hats. But yeah, there's stairs there. And I think, well, I don't know if Bob did the stairs. I don't know what happened. But whatever it was, it just absolutely flipped him the hell out.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating also that you described the sound of, like, would you call that where Rich disappeared? Would you call that dematerialization? Because it was more than teleporting, wasn't it? Because there was still an essence there. So dematerializing to that sound, what would you equate that to?
I've wondered about that. I really don't know. He said that he can travel anywhere very, very quickly. And apparently he can, because he went from down at the Temple of Pachamama to the top of Huayna Picchu in a matter of, I mean, he was sitting there relaxed 7 minutes later, just laughing and looking at me and waving. I don't know if his dematerialization is some kind of a device for travel, but I don't really understand it at all.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting point too, Jerry, because despite you knowing you're from off planet, born here, there's proof, there's legislation of this program that you were part of as a newborn child. And you've met all these beautiful and interesting extraterrestrials. Like most of us here that came through a birth canal, which you didn't in this way on the planet, even you having chosen to be part of this and take a life here, you also don't remember every single thing, do you?
No, not really. I mean, there was a time when I thought that I did, but I don't know. I've probably forgotten more than most people ever knew in this particular arena. I don't even know if that's fair to say. But there are certainly, I mean, as I talk about it, and it's like something surfaces, like this thing with Bob, for example. There are things that suddenly surface. And then it's like, well, that goes with that part of that story. And so I'm kind of reconstructing these memories as we're having our discussion, and the part I didn't tell you is what happened, with Rich and, the end result with that geophysical survey mission. And, that was pretty trippy too. But go ahead. I'm sure you have more questions.
No, this is great. You keep going. It's beautiful. We want to know about the geophysical escapade.
Well, I don't remember the year. I've never been very good with time. But you've certainly heard of the Phoenix Lights. Gigantic ship hovering over Phoenix. Kurt Russell saw it. He was flying into Phoenix. A lot of people saw it. When that happened, I was at Village Labs with Jim Delatoso and Susan Gordon and rehearsing. Our band was called UFO, UFAUX. Susan, a contactee. Jim, a contactee. So we were rehearsing this terrific music. And for those who are interested, if you want to find out about it, maybe a shameless plug, if you don't mind, Danny.
Go ahead.
All right. I put the music in our members area at jerrywillshow.com. Just go in there and look for UFO. You can also go on YouTube and look for Memories of UFO. I think it's up there.
Yeah.
If not, go to Facebook and just type in UFAUX and you'll see stuff there too. Susan's kind of taken over that page, but the music 2-album set called Ancient Masters, Recent Fools. And anyway, if you want to hear it, that's where you can get it at for free, members. Anyway, was in there playing music, phones ringing off the hook. What is it? There's a giant UFO over Phoenix. Boom, we're out of there. We never saw it. Of course, like a lot of people, seen pictures. And Lynn Kitey, she had some film. Lynn Kitey's a really neat gal. If you don't know who she is, she's a doctor in Phoenix, and she shot was 16 or 35 millimeter film of this event. It's pretty amazing, really. So that that craft that Rich had told me about came right the hell over Phoenix. Studying geophysical anomalies, I guess. Wherever it was going, I don't know where it was going. I know it was down in South America because he told me it was down there, but it was on the jungle side, and not many people on the jungle side to either see it, and if they did, who are they going to report it to? They're living nativos in the jungle. They're not going to report it to anybody of any importance except their chief. So that's what happened with that geophysical survey ship. Rich told me, because I went back down to Peru shortly thereafter, had another trip. And we were talking, and he told me that the lights have an encoded message. And so this is where it got really interesting for me. Now, apparently, when you're using a video camera, you have a shutter speed. And without going into all the technical details about it, I understand it, but it's a bit to digest. Let's just say the shutter is opening and closing, and that's how all motion picture cameras work for the most part. So you're not getting the full amount of detail. But if you had, let's say, a photo transistor hooked up to an op amp, hooked up, and in other words, you're making something that turns light into sound, which is no big deal to make if you know how. You could use like binoculars, for example, put it on there, and you could record the sound coming off of the lights, and the lights are all going to have the same information. And it's to let others know who they are. So I mentioned this. Nobody wanted to hear it. They didn't want anything to do with it. I mean, even because the problem was a lot of people did videotaping of this, and even in Kaidi, she did the film, shot to film, but even it has a shutter. And so it interrupts it periodically, and you have to have the entire string in order to find the details you need. So no one would have that, and so no one wanted to hear about it. But just for those geeks out there that are interested, there is a way that if you get the light and it's bright and it's going, that's an identifier. It's also something else. And Rich made this quite obvious one night. You see, when you're in the Sacred Valley, you have Cusco, and you go down from Cusco, 11,000 feet, down to about, 7,000, 8,000 feet to the Sacred Valley. And the Sacred Valley at one end has Pisac, and at the other end, it has Agua Caliente. It's quite long, and it's a very fertile growing valley. That's why they call it the Sacred Valley. And the river, the Urubamba River, runs through it. So we went from staying in the Sacred Valley, and it was planned at night we would travel up to this lake, an Andean lake that was nearby, kind of high, very out of the way and desolate. It's called WIPO, WEIPO. And in Spanish is Largo, Largo. So Largo WIPO. This is a place where you see UFOs. And at the time, most people talked about it, and it was, I wondered if it was a real deal, and turns out it is. Well, Rich made sure that it would be. Because I told him we were going to go there and ask him if they'd show up. He says, yeah, and I have something I want to show you. So I'm not going to tell you what it is. You'll understand later. So just don't be too surprised. And I said, I won't be surprised. I'll try not to be surprised. So we go to WIPO, and we're in this bus, and everybody gets out of the bus, and we're walking across this field like a quarter of a mile. And we're standing there near the lake. And I hear Rich in my head. He says, are you ready? And I said, yes, ready. All of a sudden, over on this hill, an orange light comes on. There's no lights in the Andes like this. Really no lights at all. Then over here, another orange light comes on. And so Rich says, turn around. And I spun around, more orange lights on all these mountains all around us. We're circled by these orange lights. The people were just flipping out. It was amazing. Then these orange lights, which we thought were stationary, they weren't. And they moved towards each other. And when it got closer and closer, they went out. And then right over the damn lake, there is this bright white light. I'm telling you, is as big as a passenger jet, but not like a cylinder, just a big white light. And it was like that bright, you'd pull your hands up. Of course, it was pretty dark too. And all of a sudden it went like, it didn't strobe, but it pulsed in a very peculiar way. Never expected that. Well, this one guy, Alfred, whips out his camera and he's trying to get pictures of it, taking pictures. And his camera is strobing the ground. I don't think he ever got a picture of anything. And of course, he went running towards it, and as running towards it, it goes from solid ground into very mushy, muddy ground, and he fell. But me and a few other people standing there were just transfixed by this. It's like this light, and just all this, just solid, and it goes like that. Then poof, it was gone. Well, everybody's just flipped out. It's 1 o'clock in the morning, and everybody is like, they're looking around. No more orange lights. They're looking up in the sky, just the stars. And they said, can we stay longer? I said, it's not coming back. That's all they're going to do. Oh, that made the whole trip worthwhile. So we all got back on the bus. We went back. Alfred's dirty, muddy. And that was that. Well, we get back to Lima a few days later. We're staying in this nice hotel, elevators, and I've got all my stuff down below. And now I'm going collecting people, seeing if I can help them with their luggage and whatnot. I get on the elevator with these two gals, and the door is still open. And we looked at each other. And at the same time, I said, we got to get off this elevator. We got off the elevator. Door closed. It went down, and it got stuck between floors, and there's nothing they could do. If we'd have gotten in there, we'd have been rescued. They could not move the damn elevator. So now we're looking at each other. How do we know that? And so it was a very peculiar thing. We made our way back to the airport, got on our flights, and flew home. The next trip down, I asked Rich about that. And he says, yeah, I was wondering if you were curious enough to ask. He says, if not, I was going to bring it up. I said, what was that? And he said, you remember that light pulsed? We knew that that elevator was going to have a problem. So we put that information into your subconscious. So at the appropriate time, it'd be released and you would do what you needed to do to be safe. Because that's how it works. He says, do you remember in your Bible how it says that, and he named off the person, I don't know who it was now, but someone saw this bright light and it glistened in their eyes and they were transfixed and afterwards forever changed. They chose an entirely different path in life. I said, at the time I remembered it. Now I don't. She says, we did it then too. Because this is one of the ways that this technology is used to try and help to guide people. But we've given up doing it, for many, many, many years now, because while it works, there are too many distractions in your world. So we wanted you to experience this firsthand. And so when I'm outside at night and I get a bright, flashy light in my eyes, that I'm getting some kind of download. He says, it could be. He says, we don't do that for everyone, but he says, there are times when we've done it. So that's pretty curious. So who knows? I mean, that's pretty wild though. It was during that trip we ended up eventually back at Ollantaytambo. This is about halfway between Pisac at one end of the Sacred Valley and Agua Caliente at the other end. Incidentally, at Pisac, you have terrific ancient city up in the mountain there, just like you do at Machu Picchu. It's just enormous. And in between, you have Ollantaytambo, which is another incredible ancient site. This is the place where you find those, was it 5 or 6? I think it's 6 standing stones made of granite that were harvested off the mountain way over there, that no one could ever figure out how they got them from there to here. They're so finely polished that it can't be explained. At least the parts you can see that was polished, that's polished now, it remains polished. So where the stones have kind of come apart, you can see how finely polished it was. Well, Ollantaytambo is an amazing place, and for your viewers who would like to see what this looks like from our perspective, from mine and Kathy's, it's in the members area also. Look for Expeditions TV inside the $15 members area, and look for Ollantaytambo. And it's not Oyan, it's Ollan. So the 2 L's are pronounced with a ya sound. Anyway, I had the people there in Ollantaytambo during the morning. We were staying, I don't know, about 10 miles away in a nice hotel. And I told them I thought it'd be really cool if they were to see it when the sun's going down. There are things you can see that the ancient builders had designed into it that you only see at sunrise or sunset. And of course, I had another motive as well, because I'd arranged for Rich to show up in a UFO. He said, yeah, not a problem. I didn't expect what was going to happen, but he said he'd show up, and I figured that's enough for me to expect. So we get over to Ollantaytambo and bribe the guard. We get in. $10 goes a long way, or used to back then. That and a pack of cigarettes, you can own the place basically. They want a bottle of whiskey. Oh my God. Anytime you come there, you'll have to give him at least a bottle of whiskey to own the place. Well, went in, $10. And we're hiking up, going to this place. There's one particular place up near these standing stones that the sun is setting behind them, kind of not directly, but a little off to the left. There's a very large mountain with a glacier on it. There's another one off to the right with snow. And I said, I just want you to see this. Because when the sun goes down and it all gets dark, except for those top peaks, it's amazing. So it's a little chilly. We're standing there. And the sun is going down and going down. And it all happens very quickly in the mountains. Suddenly, it gets dark over here on this mountain to the right, perfectly clear view. And as soon as it gets just a little darker, Rich says, "Are you ready?" And I said, "Sure." Boom, it lights up. Like you can see this in a distance, this little UFO lit up. People with binoculars could see it even better, saw people walking around underneath of it. But they said, "Wait, there's more." Boom, boom, two more of them lit up. Now there's three of them sitting over here on the snow. And there are people going one to the other, back and forth. And the folks are just going crazy. They're enjoying that so much. And Rich says, "Is that good enough?" I said, "That's great." He says, "All right, I'll see you next time." Poof, they just went out. And it's like they just disappeared. They weren't there. And people were watching and they just gone. So they must move so fast, we can't see them move. I said, "Well, maybe so."
Incredible.
So that's what happened on that particular event.
So special. What else I love about your whole, rich history and proof and validation of everything you share is the fact that also your lovely wife, Kathy, has met some of these beautiful extraterrestrial brothers and sisters.
Yeah, she saw Rich. We were in Lima. There's a place there called Pizza Street. It's in Miraflores. And it's just basically a very short little street with a major highway, major throughway, really, not a highway, throughway on one side and another major throughway on this side, just full of people. It was a Saturday or a Sunday. And we're there with our friend Peter Schneider, who went to Pizza Street, Peter and his girlfriends, plural. He had a harem. Anyway, terrific guy. Peter's is fantastic. Anyhow, we're there, and Kathy goes, "Jared, that guy over there, he just keeps looking at you." And I said, "Really? Where?" Because I was talking to Peter. Took a look around, and suddenly I made eye contact. This tall guy right over there, all these other people shorter than him. It's Peru after all. And he looks like a backpacker. Looked just the same today I met him. And he just standing there and he starts grinning real big and he goes like that. And I waved back at him. And he just turned, walked off into the crowd and just dematerialized. Kathy's watching this. It was like, "Did you see that?" When we were on our way from the Amazon to Cuzco, there's a stop off from Iquitos into Lima, and then Lima, you catch another plane and go from Lima to Cuzco. So in the jungle, the Bora tribe, which are friends of ours, been friends of mine for I don't know how many years. They gifted me with a bow, a strung bow made of ironwood, and a quiver with arrows. And it's legitimate, you know, they made this for hunting. And they gave it to me as a gift. And the reason they gave it to me as a gift, because I'd always make sure they had food, medical supplies, even when I wasn't in Peru. And when I was there, because I'm a healer, you know, I'd work on their people and make sure that they were well. If I couldn't help them, I got them a doctor and paid for it myself. So as a gift, they gave this to me. Going from Iquitos to Lima, no problem. You're coming from the jungle. You wouldn't believe what's on those airplanes. Honestly, goats, pigs, you know, large cages with chickens occupying those back seats, dogs, monkeys. It's the jungle. Use your imagination on that one. And it's on the flight from Iquitos to Lima. It's probably changed now, but back then, that's what it was like. In Lima, of course, you come out, go around, go through security again. Going through security, they did not like my quiver with arrows. You can't take that on this flight. You have to check it. So how am I going to check it? Well, you can't take it. We have to confiscate it. There's this tall black man that came up. He had the clearest green eyes you've ever seen. I think they were green. Kathy probably remember better than I would, because those two had a conversation. And she said, can we hand them to you and you put it into, you know, stowage instead of checking it? Yes, we can do that. So they took it, wrote out a receipt, tagged it, and it went off just like it was a baby carriage or something. They put it in a special compartment in the front. Yeah. And got on the flight. And Kathy's telling me this fellow is the reason why we were able to do that. So we get to Cusco. Of course, here's the ticket. Here's my quiver with the arrows. I'm going to send them now parcel post back to Lima, you know, cargo, so I don't have to deal with this again. We're walking the streets of Cusco, not far from Iquitos, near the main plaza. And this black man walks up and he says, so did you, and Kathy and I are there, did you get your quiver and arrows safely on that flight? And I said, yeah, we sure did. And thanks to you. Thank you so much for your help. And he just laughed. He says, that's not a problem. And he turned and walked into a crowded street of people. And this is Kathy's first experience. The one I told you about, Rich, that was her second. He walks into a street of people and she's watching him as he just fades into thin air. And she turned to me and says, grab my arm. Jerry, did you see that? And I said, yeah, I did. That was one of them, wasn't it? One of Rich's friends. And I said, well, apparently so. I was taken by surprise. So why didn't you tell me? I said, well, I didn't know. I mean, sure, his eyes were remarkably clear, but he didn't have the long ears. He was a very tall, fit-looking black man, nice as anything. And so that was Kathy's first experience at meeting a Pleiadian. Rich told me later who he was. That's why I know he's a Pleiadian. I'm not just drawing a conclusion. I had that conversation with Rich.
Mm, excellent. Goodness, we have been getting on for 2 hours now, and I just love to just let you go. I don't need to, you just have so much rich history of your own experiences to share. And it's really quite mesmerizing. And I'm really proud of you, proud to know you, proud to have you back on my channel. And I know that a lot of the people that watch this channel that come, the audience that come, I'm so blessed. They've been asking, where's Jerry for ages. So this is like a beautiful gift, another drop of your experiences that you're so kind and gracious to share. And it's extra nice for those that won't be able to make it to our conference, which is again where you're going to be speaking this year. You'll be there in person at the Galactic Spiritual Informers in Westminster, Colorado, September 27, 28, and 29. Would you like to give the audience just a little taster, not a taster, a hint, a little synopsis of some of the lecture that you have prepared for that lovely audience in September?
Well, I've been thinking about it a great deal. I've got a lot of different ideas. One of the things that I think is probably, at least in my opinion, that's the only opinion I've got, I think is valuable is if we're going to move forward as a species and evolve, it's probably time that we understand who we are. People look at someone from another world and put them on a pedestal, or perhaps are in awe. It's just another place. So anyway, what I want to try to impart to folks, I don't even remember how much time I've got. How much time do I have on speaking?
I don't remember, but it's not enough time. It's like David Adair, the great inventor, the great rocket man. He said to me, I'll need 3 or 4 hours. I'm like, oh my God, this is like no way. Because there's 13 of you. So you all have between an hour and an hour and a half. Some have the hour and a half, some just have an hour, but there'll be Q&A panels as well. But it's never going to be enough time. But something in me knows this year in particular at GISIC, these particular speakers, this is like an incredibly important moment in time for each to bring their piece of this beautiful embroidery, this picture that we're putting together. So it certainly isn't as much time as anybody deserves, but it's the best I can do this year.
No, I'm sure it'll be just fine. All in divine order. So how about this? How about if I do my best to help folks understand the greatness within them? There are many great people in the world. David Adair is one of them, and your other speakers I've seen. Some of them I've heard, some of them I might know. But the point is that their presence should elevate yours.
Mhm.
The things they've done are not just unique to them, it's possible for you. So what I'd like to try and do, I mean, you've heard my story, accept it or not, but you've heard the stories and all these details. I think it would be monotonous to go back and recite some of this stuff again. I will if that's what folks want. But I'd like to leave my audience with an idea of the vast potential they possess and leave them with an idea of how amazing they are. If we're going to evolve as a species on this world, it's going to require us to take one more step. I don't have all the answers. No one does. But perhaps the things that I can offer will be just another little bit here that will help you to assemble a toolkit that'll get you to the next plateau. So I think I'd like to do that. And I'll take questions. And I was thinking about that. A lot of times people ask questions and it just sort of carries on and carries on. But I'd like to also spend some time with folks and find out, what would you like to know?
Mm-hmm.
If I know, well, if I have some idea what you're just vastly curious about, how do I fix broken people? Somebody with, broken bone or some injury or some disease or something of this nature. How is it you can just go in and do what you do and then they're fine? It's about 80% of the time. How is that possible?
Yeah.
Well, it's possible because where I'm from, this is what we normally do.
Mm-hmm.
And where I am, it should be something that we normally do as well. And so, anyway, I'd like to leave my audience empowered, feeling as though they have the option for their exploration into their own greatness.
Amazing, amazing. What we could do as well, if you would like, is invite the audience that watch this to comment underneath the broadcast, not in the live chat, in the broadcast area. And then I could then forward those questions to you, as a kind of group thought for what you've just asked the question, you've just put that into the field now. So there'll be people that want to ask you a question direct that you could incorporate into your lecture. So we can do that, guys. You can leave a comment. Don't leave a whole chapter though, please. They're like, oh my God, I can get a question to Jerry Wills. That's amazing. Like, I get it. But yeah, that could be something, again, supportive into your kind of ultimate, wish for the lovely audience that come.
All right. Sounds perfect.
Excellent. Brilliant. Right. Well, we will bring this beautiful conversation to a loving close for now. Jerry, it's again an honor to have you. And I know that you are just the radiance of you, like I said before. I was talking about you the other day because I do like to brag about all these amazing people who are going to be speaking at the conference, JISC. And I was saying that it's like when you read a book, sometimes you don't always remember the words in the book, but you remember how the book made you feel, like the Celestine prophecy. But you're also like that. It's like not necessarily every single thing that you transmit, but it's the radiation, the radiance from you. It's that emission of a different frequency, which we recognize, although it's not of this planet. It's really quite lovely. And you're very excellent at doing that, Mr. Jerry Wills. You are.
I'm blushing.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you again, and I'll see you soon. And to you, lovely audience, what a treat to have the great Jerry Wills here again, sharing more insights. And I know that you'll be delighted to just sit back and enjoy these couple of hours with him. And remember, you can write your comments and I will pass them on to him for his great lecture in September 27, 28, 29. We've literally completely sold out of hotel rooms. We still have tickets. Don't worry, we've got about 200 tickets left. They're going up August 1st. So get them now. And we're going to be putting out information on the overflow hotels. So there's hotels really close by, just under the bridge, a little drive under the bridge. So we can get you that information. So you got to get your tickets. You can get a 15% discount per person if you buy at least 3 tickets in one purchase. You can buy 10 tickets and everyone's going to get 15% off. So we've tried to keep it as low as possible for the last year for you. So brilliant. All right. So my name is Danny Henderson. Thank you so much for spending time here with the great Jerry Wills and myself. I look forward to seeing you soon and send you love from my heart to yours.